que temos agora. E depois destas palavras tão inspiradoras que a Iván nos deixou, vamos passar ao nosso primeiro painel. We now begin the first panel of this afternoon, where we will explore concrete strategies for building a circular and regenerative economy at various levels. And no better to inspire us in shaping this future than those who have played and continue to play an active role in driving this change. So let's give a warm welcome to Bernd, Head of Policy and Outreach at Reimagine Europe, an initiative committed to promoting cooperation and innovation among industries and policymakers, driving sustainable change and fostering a forward-looking vision for Europe's future. Bernd. Raphaël Masvigner, co-founder of Circul'R, a company that has support over 120 business and regions in accelerating their transition to a circular economy, guiding them through every stage of their transformation. And moderating this talk, we are delighted to have Marta Brazão, President of Circular Economy Portugal, an organization dedicated to promoting the concept of circular economy with a special focus on implementing projects to encourage sharing, repairing, and reusing. Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is yours. Obrigada, até já.
Hello everyone, good afternoon, boa tarde a todos. Hello Raphaël, hello Bernd, nice to have you here. So my name is Marta and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm the president of this NGO called Circular Economy Portugal and I will be the moderator for this panel. Just to give you a brief note, this panel was supposed to be composed by 3 speakers. Unfortunately, Ken Webster cannot come and join us because he has COVID. So unfortunately, this happened, but we still have 2 amazing speakers, and we will give answer to this question and to this panel. Before we start, I just wanted to maybe just give a little bit of an introduction. We already had Yvonne with this overview of the world and about circularity, so just a little bit of an introduction and also maybe a provocation, if I might, to this panel. So, as we heard before, the world is only 7.2 circular. And I was thinking, what does this mean? When I was preparing this, I knew about the number already, and I thought, what does this mean? This means that our economy, which is a social science, actually, that studies scarcity, or that studies how we use resources, or it is the study of production, distribution, and consumption of wealth, should have the ultimate goal of helping society to make better choices. That's what I think it should be, fairly as possible. So this would be my interpretation of economics. But from the beginning of this concept, which should be how we manage the household, right? At least this was Economics 101 that I have in the university. From what we have nowadays, I believe that we got lost along the way. So how come in this economic model, supposedly so rational, so full of data and information, we take, make, and waste so much? How come we use the resources of the planet as if they were infinite? And acknowledging, with no doubt, at least for me, that something is wrong with this system, the so-called negative externalities, what new type of economy can we implement that creates positive impact, not only for the economy, but also for people and the planet, of course. So this is the small question that we're going to try to get answered here. So with me, I have Bernd and Raphaël with very different approaches, but and very complementary ways of thinking about the problem. So Bernd, because of your experience in a more we would, let's call meso approach. I would like to ask you that, given your experience before and now with Reimagined Europa, do you think that the European legislation helps design better policies, and can we design better policies at a national or local level that promote more circular economies? And if you want to get in touch also what Reimagined Europa does also, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question, and thanks very much for the invitation. Very glad to be here and talk about... there's already a feedback. So I work for Reimagined Europa. We are a think tank in Brussels, and we work with narratives. And this means we try to understand how do people construct stories and how do they see and understand them from their own value base. And we all know that climate change for some people is really important, and they really think they have all the solutions. You have the moral duty to go ahead and do it. But other people are more skeptical. Particularly in the last years, we have seen in Brussels a growing skepticism driven by populists, but also driven by some left-wing skeptics. And that's what we do. We now have made a big study on narratives on climate change. Circular economy is part of it, to understand better what's the dynamic behind it and why do people change. And it's something we'll be talking a bit later on. But if we talk about what solutions we have, we also talk about how do we tell the story. And how do we ensure we not just talk to people who already are convinced, but also people that are skeptic? Because we cannot afford just to talk to 5% of the people, and 20% are not interested, and 50% are really skeptical because they see it as some strange plot from the green movement to stop them having their real lives. That's, I think, something to keep in mind when we talk about Circul'R. The other two things I want to say is, before I talk about legislation, which is a fascinating topic, everyone loves to talk about legislation, is we also should take into account, as we also heard in some of the previous speeches, the importance of new technologies. And I think with artificial intelligence and with biotechnology, something I know a little bit more about, we have an opportunity to look into things differently. But again, we have to tell the stories right, and we also have to get the right people together to focus on what's in the public interest, not only what's the interest of the state or certain companies, but what actually is something we can do with it. Now, on the European level, we have a number of activities, as you know, from the European Commission, supported by the previous Parliament on the big Green New Deal. And a big chunk of this was the circular economy, with lots of programs and legislation ongoing. I can say that the big paper came out, I don't know if you've read it or looked at it, in 2020. And after 5 years, we can say some things were done. There was some ambition there. Not everything is really put into practice, but okay, these things take time. But in one of the reports that came back out of the Court of Auditors of the European Commission, they said, well, the problem is it doesn't seem to go down to member states. Member states take very little up of these ideas and legislation and make it work. And this also means local and regional authorities will not really address these issues. So one of the topics to discuss is how can we get from nice, general, well-meaning European legislation, something practically on the ground we can work with. The other problem is, or challenge, I think maybe the problem is that we have now, with the change of the parliament, a much more center-right populist parliament. And also the Commission feels that. If you look at the new Commission, you will have, to the glee of many NGOs, a new commissioner for the circular economy, which is one of the main topics. The question is, how strong will she be, and how well will she work together with Teresa Ribeira, who will be the General Change Commissioner. And you have some people already in the parliament and said, well, let's see how far we go on this, because we want to see what you do of competitiveness and what you do for innovation. So we have to see how the new commission plays out in your parliament, and this will also have an impact on and how we do legislation will do. If I can make a last point, in looking at narratives, sometimes some things we call narrative traps, some ideas we have in our minds which are not true, but go well down with our different groups. And one, for example, is there's a fundamental polarization between sustainability and innovation. So for some people, they say technology cannot really help us, it's just old classical green ways. And other people say, well, it needs to be innovation, it's just some green thinking and dreaming. And this polarization is false. What we have to try to work with on the European level, national, but also our stakeholders, is to get beyond this black-white thinking and see what's the middle way. How can we tell this story, this narrative, differently?
Thank you. Raphaël, I would ask you, because you come from a consulting company, can I call it like that, Circul'R, and actually France is really a front runner, at least in my opinion, about circular policies and sustainability at the legislation level. But in the ground with your company, what are you doing to help companies transition and creating this better economy? And if you want also to touch maybe the positive aspects, but also the obstacles that you see working with these companies.
Ok. Bom dia a todos. Vou continuar em inglês. So, as you were saying, since the last 10 years with Circul'R, we've been helping big companies, especially in France, transitioning from linear business model, take, make, dispose, to circular economy business models. The first learning I would like to share with you after a 10-year experience in this field is that if you want to convince big companies or ex-com members, such as Claudia from Sonae, you have to go beyond sustainability. If you just talk about circular economy to explore the field of sustainability, to tackle planet boundaries, it's key, but you need to talk about business. You need to talk about the cost of inaction. Otherwise, like big companies are not going to listen to you. Because once again, their key priority is to build their business and to make the business stronger. So what we realize is that if you convince big companies, you have to talk about the cost of inaction, and you have to explain how circular economy can first help you mitigate risks, because there are going to be lots of shock of natural resources because of scarcity of natural resources. We're going to have shortage of natural raw materials, and that's going to be a problem for big companies. Circular economy is a key tool to mitigate risk. And the other way you can see circular economy is a way to build a circular and resilient business on the long term. So that's the two learnings. Go out of the way of just sustainability, but talk about business and circular economy as well. Now, if we focus on France and big companies, either it's in France or in Europe, just to have it in mind, how many people here in the room are representing companies? Can you raise your hand, please? Okay, so basically, when you're within a company, you have three main phases where you can play with the circular economy. The first one is the production phase, and at this stage, you can work on sustainable supply. It's basically how you're going to switch from virgin material to basically secondary raw materials or renewable materials. So these are going to be the procurement team working on that, the supply chain team, that's key. And then there is the design part. How are you going to design a product so that at the end of the life, it doesn't become a waste and it can enter in the different loops that Ivan was presenting us. So that's the first step. And this step is key because at this stage, the production phase, you can reduce up to 80% of the impact of a product. The second phase is the usage phase. Once a product is on the market, you're going to use it, there's going to be impact. As Ivan was saying just before, the first thing is frugality. We don't need to produce what we don't need, you know? But then you have to move from linear business model to circular economy business model, such as service economy or sharing economy. Instead of selling a product, you sell the usage of the product. And here it's key also to move from an extractivist point of doing business to a linear point of doing business. And there, once again, there are some companies such as Decathlon, and I will go back to that, that are developing a circular economy business model. And just to give you key figures, Decathlon, they have a target on circular economy business models. It has to be representing 15% of the turnover by 2026. So it's tomorrow, and it's happening. And then the last phase is basically giving a new life or end of the life. And here you work with the logistic team or with your providers and your partners. And basically it's first how you sort and collect well, and then basically how you put in place a loop. And one other key learning, recycling is part of the economy. But please, 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 always favor the shortest loop. Reuse, repair, refurbish. And if you cannot do that, recycle. Why? Because if you look at recycling, it's one of the biggest loops in circular economy. What does it mean? When you're recycling, you are emitting a lot of CO2 emission, you're using a lot of water, you're using a lot of energy. When you're doing repair, refurbishment, that's not the case. So in a sustainable point of view, it's a way better to move to a smaller loop than bigger loop. So that are the three phases where you can play to activate circular economy, and that are the key learnings we had so far.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, we also talked about this when we had our session amongst ourselves, that I also made a provocation about this innovation aspect that nowadays is very in vogue, and usually companies also ask for this, right? So circular economy, but needs to be innovative. And my provocation, and we can restart that conversation again, is for me sometimes, and I don't know if you had this feeling, that circular economy sometimes feels like we're going back in some type of economy or usage or habits. And even though no one wants to go to be the caveman again, it's not it. Sometimes we're not innovating in the sense that we're not creating like the wheel again, right? So for you, Raphaël, I would ask, how do you sell this idea of circular economy? Being innovative, yes, but really going back to a different system, this system that we have right now, right? Because we are asking for companies to change the business model. Or at least that's what we want. And for you, Bernd, the question of this, the innovation, but also with the social aspect of this, because you talk a lot about the polarization that is happening right now. So do we have a narrative for the future, a common? Is it needed? And maybe circular economy can be one of these narratives for this social development and for this innovation case. So whoever wants to start.
Okay. I will go back to your previous question that I didn't answer at the level of circular economy. That's important because I would say that I don't have to sell circular economy to big companies any longer. Why? Because they are, no, that's not true. Obviously, I have to convince them, but there's 3 levers that are pushing big companies to do circular economy. The first one is what you were talking about just before. It's like fit with existing regulation. CSRD, critical raw material like ESPR, these are all regulations that are going to impact big companies now. So they need to do it, otherwise they will pay tax penalties. Then business, once again, there is a cost of inaction when you are not moving to a circular economy. So now you have a turnover at risk if you're staying on a linear economic model. So like instead of losing 20 million in the 5 coming years, you just have to invest 5 million to mitigate risk and implement circular economy business model. So business-wise, it's interesting for companies, and that's why they invest in it. Third point, consumers. Consumers are more and more demanding on like transparency and the impact of the product. Once again, it's pushing companies, especially B2C companies. And I don't know if you heard about this application, Yuka. It's basically an app where you can scan the product and you see the impact of the product. Intermarché, which is basically a big retailing company, a big supermarket, maybe Sonai know them, they had to withdraw 400 of their references because they had a bad score. So transparency and consumer is pushing. And then like returning talents, obviously a company, for instance Sonai is no more than key people, such as Claudia and other people. If you don't like take strong commitments on circular economy, you're not going to retain the talents. A company such as Total in France is struggling to get new talents. So that was just to say that I no longer have to struggle to sell circular economy. I have to convince them and so on. But and about collaboration has been changing in the last, let's say, 4 to 5 years. Like 10 years ago, big companies were basically partnering with startups. That was easy for them because they were not taking too much risk. They were not transforming their core business model. They were not transforming their supply chain. It was helping them to do pilot projects, explore circular economy, and maybe find new way of doing businesses. But now, once again, because of shortage, because of legislation, companies have to move a step further. So there is still this collaboration between startup and big companies for innovation, and it's great because startups are super agile and help companies innovating. In Circul'R, we have created a club where basically CEO of startups meets the CEO of CAC40, so that's key. But what we see, the move that's happening is that big companies are now no longer just collaborating with startups, but with also collaborating with other big companies. Even there is collaboration, but also co-opetition, meaning that even competitors are willing to cooperate. And just to give you one last example, concrete example, we just launched with Circul'R a coalition in the cosmetic industry. Basically, we have a law where cosmetic industry leaders need to re-employ the packaging, reuse the packaging. They're not respecting the law. And within this coalition, we have Estée Lauder, we have Dior, we have Clarins, we have L'Oréal. They're all competitors. But to mitigate risk, to share the cost, they need to collaborate and they need to innovate together. So to end up on innovation, I think collaboration between startups and big companies is key, but now we're moving more and more toward big companies with big companies and even competitors together.
Okay. Bernd?
Yeah, maybe just 3 points I would like to take out. The first is, I was astonished. I worked for a big company in the area of biotech, so biotech is close to my heart. I asked the scientists always when they did some new on plant biotech or health biotech, so beyond the technical aspect, what's the impact on society? They said, we don't know. It's not our business. Some other people will know, but somehow never really looked at it. And this is one fascinating thing, that if you look how innovation can change things, it's beyond just discussing how railway works or how do you transport people, but what's the impact on society. And many social structures, like the public company or like the patent, are not scientific inventions. They're social inventions and have a huge impact on how the economy works. So my plea is, particularly in this new digital, hopefully also bioeconomy age, to think about, are our old structures still worth keeping and how do we change them? But also, what is the impact going to be beyond nice brochures from scientists or companies, or catastrophic tales from some civil society groups that everything will be horrible, but no. Let's look at it, see it out, and see what really changes. I would like to answer your second part, to look a little bit on something that's called the European bioeconomy. There is a consortium in Brussels, 2 billion euros, companies and money from the European Commission, that tries to get a new cycle going on biomass, using biotech, which is very quick-moving science, as a basis. And this has been actually very successful. And it's a bit different from the classical discussions on circular, because there's not using existing materials in the same way, but take, for example, CO2 not from fossil fuels, so replace, but from nature, or from the air, get CO2, suck it out of the air and start to use it to making materials out of it. And that's a very interesting, very different approach. And there are many interesting examples, and I won't want to go too deep into it, how you can make differences. But for example, I learned that a young scientist in Denmark created a new way how to put asphalt together, not with bitumen from oil, but actually by mushrooms. And it works very well, and it's a huge volume they can use. So it shows how little scientific change can make a dramatic impact on the way how this works. If we would go systematically through it and try to work this as a society, not just as a project here and there, this would make a big difference. That's my final plea, maybe, not to the public, but to politicians, but also to the entrepreneurs. Let's put this down systematically and not just go and do our parallel ways. This will make a huge difference to go forward.
Agree. And because of time, I will ask you, is there the time? I will ask you just to briefly, so imagining the world that we can design this better economy, how do you personally or your organization, how do you feel or how do you want to fit in this creation of this new positive economy? Can you imagine?
At least I will share a conviction. At Circul'R, we're convinced of one thing. What happened in the 70s with the technical and numeric revolution, technological revolution, is exactly what's happening with circular economy right now. Back in the 70s, companies such as Microsoft, Apple, seized the opportunity of the technological revolutions. Other companies such as Kodak disappeared, IBM, they struggled to get back on the business. It's exactly the same on circular economy. Like companies that are not seizing the opportunity right now will lag behind, and the companies that will involve themselves fully into circular economy will be the future leader of tomorrow. That's really happening. And just to give you 2 concrete examples, because I'm talking, but I'd like to talk about metrics as well. Once again, Decathlon in 2023, just out of their circular business models, they managed to create a turnover of 500 million euros. We're talking about hundreds of millions of euros. Renault, that are doing cars, they have a target of 2.3 billion euros in terms of turnover by 2030. We're no longer talking about just experimenting circular economy, just bringing it to a next level. And the conviction is the right time is now. And if you don't seize the opportunity, that's going to be a problem.
I try to stay with 1 minute, so
No.
keep in time.
That's
okay.
No, please.
It's a challenge. So I just would say 3 areas. The first is I would love to see in 20 years' time that people don't talk polarized way about here is nature and there's innovation, but there's a common approach to say we have to go forward, what works, what's pragmatic, if it's in the interest of society. This is my first vision to say reimagine. That's what we do every day. The second point, I think, is that companies are going ahead and scientists to research, to innovate, to move ahead in a very light framework of legislation, not as heavy as we have now. I think will help artificial intelligence, but that we get away from this idea that governments have to produce legislation, be meaningful. I think particularly for the Commission, that's a very bad thing to do. And I personally think that with this new technology, we have a chance to really build a circular economy, maybe even getting many of our biomass, again, out the air, to shrink the CO2 back where it should be. This, I think, would be the holy grail. How quick we go there, we'll see, but I think the technology and the science gives options. We might get there soon enough.
Thank you very much, Raphaël. Thank you very much, Bernd. Thank you all for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's it for us. If you want, we'll be around to talk and explore more this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.